Welcome to The Human Experience, a podcast about the stories we live out every day and the importance of championing the vulnerability and courage of the storyteller. I'm your host, Jennifer Peterkin, and it was through my own lived story of experiencing domestic violence that this podcast was created. By traveling the globe and interviewing each guest in person, I am convinced now more than ever that stories have the power to change the world. You can join our community of storytellers by subscribing, leaving a rating and review, signing up for my newsletter, following me on Instagram, and more. Thank you for being here. In a world full of noise, to listen with intention is an act of resistance. Episode 78 of The Human Experience is Sophia's story. Sophia believes in the power of miracles and that they are happening all around us. Convinced that she would never get married or have children or write a book, Sophia now finds herself having done all three. And she credits that to what she calls miracles and an openness to embrace the opportunities that come your way. Sophia has enjoyed 3 diverse careers, a decade in architecture that included working with notable 20th century visionary Dr. Buckminster Fuller, running her own couture fashion business, and working as a mental health therapist in private practice. She also created Living a Fearless Life, a 12-workshop program designed to increase self-esteem in at-risk women, which was piloted in the Philadelphia prison system. She is currently employed by the Salvation Army as an in-house counselor in residence for ex-trafficked women. This episode was recorded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Sophia, thank you so much for doing this today. We're in your home, which is fabulous, in Philadelphia. I'm from outside of Philadelphia, so it was really easy for me to pop over here, which is always so nice because I am carrying my equipment into Philadelphia is a lot different than carrying it over to Europe or Africa or Asia or any one of those places. So thank you for having me in your home to talk about your story.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast. And I am just so impressed that you have this format of going to people's homes. I just find it so, because I've been on a lot of podcasts, but there's something to this in person.
Proximity.
Yes.
Yeah. Proximity matters for sure. I very much believe in its value, clearly, as I am spending a lot of my resources to make that happen. But I truly have seen a difference in this and have just met the most beautiful people along the way. And I continue to be excited about meeting new people and learning new stories. And yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful time. So we're here for your story, which I know a little bit about because we've been chatting for a little bit, but I'm excited to kind of get into where you started and how you got to where you are, because we haven't really talked about that. So I know from just the past hour of us talking, and I didn't realize you're originally from Oregon.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I was born in Detroit.
Oh, okay.
And then when I was 7, my father, who was generation older than my friends' fathers. I mean, he got married when he was 57.
Okay.
And we moved to Greece.
Oh.
And so I had a just magical childhood because we didn't have any relatives in Detroit, Dearborn. And so we go to Greece and all of a sudden there's this extended family and, my cousins were there to play with and it was just magical. And then it's a long story, but when the Bay of Pigs happened with John F. Kennedy, my father got very insecure about what was going to happen, and he moved us back to the States.
Okay.
So, and then we ended up in Oregon.
And then, so how did you get to Philadelphia?
Oh, well, so it took a long time for me to find my true kind of what I wanted to major in. So basically, to my father's chagrin, because I was in school for 10 years because I kept changing my major.
Okay.
And so at one point, I wanted to be an archaeologist. Okay. And so my father, because I was almost supposed to graduate in art education.
With your degree, with a degree in archaeology?
A degree in art education.
In art education.
And I just needed to do my student teaching, and I was going to, and 6 hours left. and I changed my major.
Oh my goodness.
And he had a fit. But then I got a scholarship to study in Italy with an Etruscanologist. And so he got very impressed with that. So then it was okay, So one of my roommates in Italy, we would like stay up and, smoke galois and philosophize. So one time, one of my roommates, Ward asked me, if you could be with anybody dead or alive for half an hour, who would it be? And I thought, I don't know, whoever I thought, that's not even the point. So I said, well, who would it be for you? And he goes, Buckminster Fuller. And I went, I knew that Buckminster Fuller had invented the geodesic dome, but that was it. And because I'm thinking, wait, from everybody dead or alive, Bucky Fuller? And so I said that to him, and he gets up and he brings me this thin little book. It was like, I think 40 pages of a poem called No Secondhand God. So he hands it to me, and I read this poem, and I am blown away. Blown away. And he quickly became my idol.
Wow.
And that's when I decided to change my major and go into architecture.
Okay.
And my father cut me off financially until I could prove to him that, because if you don't want me to do something, just tell me I can't do it. And then I will show you, So what happened, a friend of mine came over. He was a president of the student union. And he says, guess who's coming? Because I read everything about Buckminster Fuller. And he says, guess who's coming to lecture on Tuesday? I said, Buckminster Fuller. And he said, would you like to come with me and pick him up at the airport in Portland? And I'm like, what? And anyway, I met him and his wife. They invited me to be with them during the day. And then we started a correspondence. And he asked me to work with him after I graduated from architecture school.
Wow.
So the idea that I get to work with my idol is huge. And that's how I got to Philadelphia.
That's amazing. And then you stayed.
I stayed.
So architecture, how long did you work in architecture?
10 years.
Okay.
But at the end, the last few years, I was designing biotechnology laboratories. And that just became so far from beauty that I took a leave of absence. And that's when I decided to go into fashion.
And so that is maybe it's not, but to me, it sounds like such a big leap. So how did you get from one to the other?
Well, it was interesting. A friend of mine who had his own interior architecture business went to work for a firm. And so he turned over his projects to me. And one of the projects was to design a store. This woman was opening, and she had a lot of fashion experience as a buyer. And so what she did, it was called One Night Stand, and she would buy these really expensive, beautiful designer gowns and rent them out.
Okay.
And so we just decided after, I designed, finished the design for her, we just opened it up together. And that was my initiation, although I sewed from a young age.
Okay. So it wasn't totally out of the blue for you.
No, because I would design a lot of my outfits.
I guess it's not so drastic when you think of it from a design perspective, right? Because an architecture, to a degree, is also a designer. So, but then a totally different medium of design.
See, when you're doing architecture, you really want to pay attention to the site, okay? And so now you just pay attention to the body. But you know what? There is a thread here.
Okay.
There's a thread. Because when I was in architecture school, I just wanted to design the beautiful building. And then after working with Bucky Fuller, it was solving a problem. And then when I got into dress designing, I just wanted to, design these beautiful dresses to make women feel beautiful. And then something happened there. And it was like, wait a second, some of my beautiful, rich women were miserable. And then these like over queen size women, like were just had that, they were just so into life and self-confident. And I thought, what's up with this picture? It has to be more than a dress to make you feel good. And that is when I decided that it was self-esteem. That self-esteem was the culprit. So that's when I went back to school and graduated when I was 50 in counseling psychology. And again, it was, when it was like, wait a second, I started to do gowns for the so-called problem figure. So I had two great assistants, and we produced like 30 gorgeous evening gowns for pregnant women. So, and they would rent them.
Wow.
So you didn't have to buy it.
Yeah.
And so it was like, solving the problem was the thing. And so I think finally I'm at my true purpose is helping people.
Yeah.
Helping people. And so my current job, my employer's the Salvation Army, and there's a residence for ex-trafficked women. And I am the in-house counselor and working with a lot of trauma. And a lot of the women resist the help, but I have my success stories. Mm-hmm. So if you can help one person on that level, you're doing good.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to obviously come back to what you're doing now, but I think what struck me as you were speaking was, I think a lot of us want to be helpful, right? If you believe that most people are doing the best that they can, I think that it is something that people strive for, is to be able to help other people. But we think of helpers as in this very narrow way, right? And so to hear you talk about all of these different things that you did in your life, and your end goal was helping people, even if you didn't realize that's why you were doing what you were doing at the time, right? And I think it's just such a poignant way to say, like, you can be that person in whatever capacity you have, in whatever field you're in, whatever you're good at, because we're not all made for the same things, right?
Right. We all have our special gifts.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So how long did you do the dress design?
Another decade.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then went back to school, got your counseling degree. Mm-hmm. Did you start working with the Salvation Army right away?
No.
Okay.
No. I worked at an agency, then I had private practice, and this is relatively new because I retired and I was not in the job market. I was not looking for a job, but the job found me.
Yeah.
And so I feel it obliged to do it because I don't see, it's not fair. It's just not fair that I had, these loving parents and this merry little childhood and these women. I mean, there are women who have been trafficked by their mothers for drug money. And so why I feel obliged to help.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't like to think of, even in 2025, trafficking being something that Americans deal with. And obviously that's not the case. And so what does that look like in a city like Philadelphia? In terms of, how do people get help? How do people get found? And then what is the process for hopefully rehabilitation?
Well, there's a lot of mental illness that comes along with this, because there's been a lot of, all I can say is trauma, just abuse and trauma. And mental illness results. And so there are some women that are not capable of holding a job. So they go from sort of like from one residential facility to another, but then they don't want to relive the trauma. And so, but then there are those that, want their own apartment, and to be able to help them, to come from just coming in off the street or from another residence. There's also a drop-in center So there's active women that are actively being trafficked, and a lot of them, against their will. And so it's dealing with a lot. But once they're out of it, then we can process. But there's, again, some that are not capable of processing.
Yeah. And so then in that case, what's the difference in, I guess, trafficking versus prostitution?
In my mind's eye, prostitution is your choice. Okay? It's your choice. Some people, that's the way they want to make their money. But to be made to do it, and literally to hear stories of escape, it's hard to believe. It's like, I can sit here and go, that would never happen to me. I would find a way, but the way that it's the forced part is, it alters you on a cellular level.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that's such a good point because I do a lot of work in domestic violence advocacy. And so there is this kind of feeling if somebody hasn't been in a situation like that before, like, oh, well, why didn't you leave is such a huge question. And if I was there, like I would have been gone or, this is so obvious to me. And it's really looking at something extremely complex and nuanced and having such a clear-cut answer to something that really isn't clear-cut. There are a million different variables, but not to mention the fact that it does change you. Trauma rewires your brain, right?
Yes.
So it really doesn't account for the changes you actually experience on a physical level, just being in that kind of relationship, whether it's, there are a lot of different kinds of abusive relationships. So how did you get involved with this, with the Salvation Army?
Oh, it was a friend of mine who volunteers told me about the job. And so it's part-time and it's very fulfilling.
Yeah. But do you find it, this is your background. So do you find it difficult to be in that kind of setting and just hearing these kinds of traumas over and over again?
No. My attitude towards that is that these women are suffering whether I'm here or not. So if I'm here and I can help, but I will give you a little secret that I think helps a lot. So I don't know if you've heard about the Course in Miracles, and which I've studied. There's a prayer that I say every morning. So I'm going to tell you, it's 5 lines.
Okay.
I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent him who has sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do because he who sent me will direct me. I'm content to be wherever he wishes, knowing he goes there with me. I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal.
Wow.
So that just takes the edge off and I can be present.
Yeah, truly. It really is a wonderful preparation of your heart and mind to go into that situation. That's beautiful. So A Course in Miracles is something that I had not heard of before, but it has become such an incredibly huge part of your life and your purpose. So where does that enter your life in this equation of, going through being an architect, being a designer, being a therapist? Where does this spiritual awakening enter for you?
Well, I feel like I was forced to, the way this book came into my life through a miracle, and I write about it in my first book, The Divine Language of Coincidence, how it came about, which was literally tripping on it and not wanting to read it, not wanting to buy it because it looked too much like the Bible. And then it just kept slapping me from all different directions. And it was, I would say, about 2 years from when I initially received this pamphlet about it and that I was forced to read it. And it's Christ-based, However, I did attend a meeting where it was all Jewish women talking about taking the hand of Christ. Because I told my husband, I said, I can't believe this meeting, these Jewish women talking about taking the hand of Christ. And he said, what makes you think they were Jewish? And I said, well, because they couldn't do it the next month because it was Rosh Hashanah. Anyway, so it's Christ-based in that is what Christ stood for, not religious. It's just a way of, living your life. And it has guided me, so it's a big part.
Yeah. Yeah. So because you grew up Greek Orthodox, which makes sense, knowing who your family is, obviously, and you still practice Greek Orthodox. Okay. And so growing up, what did faith mean to you?
Well, see, my mother Greek is my first language, and she always talked about faith in God, and I didn't know what it meant until I began my spiritual journey and how that tripped me, how that changed me. Because I did move away from the church, and that happened my first year in college when I took my first philosophy class. And it was ethics. And it was like, wait a second, you don't have to, be a Christian to be a good person, and so I kind of pulled away. But then I read this book it was by Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist monk, and who's also a Christian scholar. And it's Living Buddha, Living Christ. And that got me to turn and to realize that all the major religions, the concept, the philosophy is really the same. It's about how we treat each other,
Yeah. Yeah. So walk me through then how your life was changed and how miracles became such a big part of your life.
Okay. So it started when I was 19. Okay. So I was in college. I was a junior in college. I was 19. And I was going through two major issues, existential issues, that I believed were unsolvable. Okay. So the one issue was that once in a while there would be somebody who didn't like me. They didn't know me, but it didn't get off to a good start, this relationship or something. And these people wouldn't like me. And I thought, what? I can't believe this because I'm a good person. Like, why? She doesn't even know me, why doesn't she like me? Why is she like this? And I mean, I was conflicted with it. Okay. So that was one issue about needing my peers' approval. I needed my peers' approval. And the other issue is I had kind of bought my mother's law of being a virgin until you're married. And marriage never appealed to me that much. And so I'm like, wait a second, I'm going to be a virgin and, I'm going to die a virgin. And so I was like conflicted. And then I met a man that I was very attracted to. I was 19, he was 27. He had already been married and divorced. He was working on his PhD. And then I had a dream. Okay. I had a dream and it was a very vivid dream. And it's in the book, but just to do the beginning and the end. So the dream starts out that I'm on a stage with all these people in the auditorium and I'm wearing a wedding dress. But I'm in a plexiglass like box or like a phone booth, but plexiglass. There's no groom. And I'm just so amazed at all these people that came to see me. And, oh, wow, this is just so wonderful. And anyway, all this stuff happened in the dream. And then at the end of the dream, I see that I'm wearing the same wedding dress, but I'm in a coffin. And these people are coming by to pay their respects. And anyway, this thing happened at the end that some people wouldn't look at me, some would. And so I wake up and I'm in a tizzy because I thought that this was, foretelling my imminent death, And I was so in such a panic that it was 1:30 in the morning and I went to this man's house. And I told him the dream. And what he said to me was, this has nothing to do with physical death. He said, what this means is that there's certain beliefs that are not working for you anymore that need to be dispelled so that new beliefs that work for you come in and replace them. And I was just blown away by that. And then he went to the desk and he brought out these poems that he had written about me and where I was like in the sexual conflict. And I thought, how can he know exactly how I feel? And I knew that this was going to be my first sexual experience. It did not happen that night, but it soon did. And it was pretty remarkable. And then the whole thing from when I met him to when it just evaporated. It was like he was this angel or something, this angel man that appears, does his work and disappears. And it was like, because I was a party girl and I could only talk about universal theories to a point, but it was just, and I was completely transformed. So not only this is what I wanted to do, but also after that, I never cared what anyone thought of me. I was transformed. I entered womanhood, a transformed person. And so I thought, how can that happen? How can a dream like that? I mean, who communicates these things? And this person, it was just so coincidental, synchronicity. It was the synchronicity of it. And that is when I started paying attention. And then I could recognize more things like that coming into my life. And a lot of the miracles were things that weren't even solicited. They started happening. And then my friends would say, well, these things only happen to you. And which I found annoying because I'm not special. I'm not a guru or a saint or anything. And then in 2011, I was reconnecting with a childhood friend and I told her my latest miracle. And she said, well, these things only happen to you. And then that is when it clicked because, when I started out, I did not want to get married. I did not want children and I did not want to write a book. And yet I was successfully single until I was 45. I met Frank. That is a journey in and of itself. We adopted a young woman. And here I was with a child. She was 18. And I wrote 2 books, so and what happened, what was the switch was because I thought, wait a second, that everybody has a story about a coincidence or a miracle, but there's just too many. And I thought and thought about it, and I realized that I actually made a list of all my miracles and coincidences. And when I realized that every miracle followed a coincidence that I took action on. Mm. So the coincidence, because I believe, here's my worldview. Okay, my worldview is that there's divine intelligence that knows what's best for us better than we do and communicates with us through dreams, through meeting a stranger that says exactly what we need to hear for that moment, or puts coincidences on our path. And if we just go, oh, wow, what a coincidence, and let it go by, that's how it remains, a coincidence. But if you take action, and that is what I realized. When you take action on a coincidence, you co-create the miracle with divine intelligence. You become a co-creator. And so that is how I've lived my life. And when you get to that point, I in my book, I kind of have 3 levels of, like, let's say a spiritual journey. Okay. So level 1, I would say, is predicated on wishful thinking. So you wish for something. Here comes the coincidence. You go, oh, wow, what a coincidence. Don't take action. Continue to wish. Another coincidence. Don't take action. And that's how you don't get the miracle. Second level is from the perspective of hope. Now you know that, oh, this is a coincidence. I'm going to take action and hope I get what I need. And then the next level is faith. Is that, and when you reach that level, you're not worried about anything. You're not worried. I mean, I have, thank God, what I thought was the most horrific obstacle at the time and screaming, God, why are you doing this to me? I have thanked God for those obstacles. I mean, they saved me from a bad relationship and death itself. So I think that's when you get to that point that you just go with the flow, and it's just so freeing.
Yeah. Wow. I love the way that you're talking about taking action, right? Because we are participants in our own life. We can't be passive and expect things to just happen to us, right? And it just makes me wonder how many opportunities we let pass us by because we think, like, if I just, stay still and wait, then I'll get what I need or what I want. And while there is a benefit to stillness, there's a time for it, right? And then there's a time for action. So I just think that's a really interesting perspective. And it really activates us into being participants of our own life and what our future looks like.
Well, I can give you a couple of examples.
Yes, please do.
So, there's coincidence, and then there's meaningful coincidence. Okay, so for example, like a plain old coincidence, I would say it's like the other day I was typing and I typed the word transgression. Now, I used that once in a blue moon, okay? And then just as I'm typing transgression, somebody says it on the TV. I'm like, wow, from all the words in the English language, what a coincidence. But does it mean anything? No.
Yeah.
Okay. But here's 2 things. And I don't believe that one miracle is bigger or better than the other, although maybe some are more important. So these 2 events happened just before our wedding. Okay. So Frank and I decided to get married on 4th of July, and the wedding was 4th of October. So it was 3 months to plan. So all the venues were taken, music, was tough to find. And I thought, oh, well, we'll go through somehow, And so this happened just before. Okay. So there's two things. And then maybe you can tell me which one you think is stranger. Okay. Okay, so the first one, I dial my friend Anne, and a man answers who's not her husband. And I just said, is Anne there? And this guy says, Sophia, is that you? It's Jerry. You called me. Look, I'm really late for a meeting, and can I call you later this afternoon? And I'm like, he had a Greek accent, and I knew this guy socially. Okay, and somehow he recognized my voice and tells me this. And I said, Jerry, you have to promise. You have to promise that you're going to call me back, okay? Promise me. And he says, I promise. I'll call you back. I said, what is your phone number real quick? I had misdialed the last digit. And I get somebody that I know, okay? So he does call. And we were talking, and I told him about the wedding and, trying to find a place. And he says, he happened during maybe 3 or 4 years, he happened to own the Barclay Hotel on Rittenhouse Square. And he gave me the ballroom.
Oh my.
For free, except that I had to invite him and his girlfriend to the wedding, and then threw in the presidential suite for 2 nights. Okay, so that is one. The other one is I get a call at my studio from this woman, and she said, "Is it Sophia?" And I said, "Yes." And she says, "Well, I found your driver's license." And I said, "Oh, okay," with snow, and I don't like to hold on to bags, like purses or anything. So I have everything in my pocket. And lo and behold, I don't have my driver's license. And she said, "How can I give it to you?" So turns out she lived 2 blocks away. And I said, "Oh, just put it through the mail slot." So she did. She had a lovely little note with it that said that, because it was an Oregon driver's license, and how much she and her boyfriend loved Oregon. And that was that. So I thought, oh, okay, nice. 2 months later, I get a call from the same woman. And she says, "I think you'll find this a little strange, but I just found your ATM card." Okay, now I don't lose cards. And there was an ATM that I would go to that it took your card and then spit it right out.
Mm-hmm.
But this particular ATM kept the card. And then it says, "Do you want to make another transaction?" Well, somehow I didn't look at this because I normally have the card
you were
right
used
away.
to it, spitting it out. Yeah.
And so she was the next person. I mean, somebody else could have wiped out my whole bank account. And she gets this card and it's mine.
Wow.
So she said, "Do you want me to put this through your mail slot?" I said, "No." I said, "We have to meet. You have to come to my studio and meet." So I had this handmade soap. So she comes to the studio, and I gave her the soap, and turns out, okay, long story short, she is a concert violinist. And as a result of that meeting, she got her friend, who's a classic guitarist, to play my favorite Concierto d'Aranjuez, at the church while I'm going down the aisle.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so which one do you think is stranger?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I mean, probably the second one, I guess. But yeah, the second one, because you didn't know her at all. But that's just amazing.
Well, so here's the takeaway, okay? The takeaway is how easy it would have been when Jerry said, "I'll call you later," to just say, "No, you don't have to.
Don't worry about it.
No,
Yeah.
I have nothing to talk to you about. This was just wild, Okay. And then when she said, "Do you want me to put it through the mail slot?" I go, "Yeah, I mean, this is really wild, but yeah, just put it through the mail slot." But it was bigger than me. That's the realization that this is bigger than me. So the coincidence, taking action on the coincidence, brought the miracle, which I define to be getting exactly what you need at the right time. Now, there are 3 coincidences that brought my husband and I back together after I had left him. That also proved to be healing in our relationship, that now I am actually married to my dream guy, and it's the same guy. So is one bigger or better than the other? No. But I would say saving my marriage, having my marriage saved, is more important.
Sure. How do you, and maybe it's like flexing a muscle or strengthening a muscle, how do you determine the difference between meaningful coincidence and regular coincidence?
Well, the meaningful coincidence is when it's bigger than you. I mean, it's not let me look at this, in pros and cons, and should I act or should I? In these cases, it was immediate. And I think the muscle which is perfect, a perfect analogy to your inner voice, your intuition. So what happens is these communications come through your intuition. You take action. now you get the miracle. Now that it's sort of proves that your intuition was right. Now you're freer to take action on the next intuition. And then finally, it's just like, an athlete that doesn't have to think.
Yeah.
You just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I think a lot of things are like that. We don't necessarily attribute that kind of exercise, right? Like we understand the benefits of physical exercise. We can see in the mirror, the fruit of that. But I think mental and emotional and spiritual exercise is just as, if not more so important. But we're not necessarily told that. That's not necessarily culturally, at least in the American greater culture, is something that is prioritized. And so I think having these experiences where you realize, oh my goodness, this is such an important part of my life, and look at what it has, how much fuller it has made my life, how much richer it has made my life. I think it's just such an important piece of the puzzle, to the whole picture of humanity.
Well, in the divine language of coincidences, because it's a memoir, all the miracles are pretty much chronological, but there are 2 chapters. One is titled Please, which is about prayer, and the other one is Thank You, which is about gratitude. And the events in those chapters are thematic. There's a theme to them. And what I have come to realize, and it happened when I realized that in Greek, the Lord's Prayer does not contain the word forgiveness, which when I realized it, I just couldn't believe. And I really paid attention to the Greek version. And it turns out that if you don't know the Lord's Prayer in the Greek version, you're gypped, because there's so much that has been lost in translation. So what I did in the Please chapter, I retranslated the Lord's Prayer to get back to that nuance. And it got the stamp of approval of a Greek theologian. And so none of this has been written to convince anyone to do anything.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is what worked for me. This is what works for me. And so when you find yourself like desiring something and praying for it, and I don't mean, like formal prayer, just walking down the street, just thinking about what you want. I always add to that, like, I want this, and then I add, or whatever is best for me. And then you let go. So you bring the ingredients to the table and let God do the cooking.
I love that. Let God do the cooking. So and you mentioned this before we started recording, but all of these things that you thought you didn't want out of your life and you ended up having, and it's ended up making your life better, or it's been what you couldn't have even imagined.
Exactly.
Right?
And I can't imagine not having these things in my life. Like, it truly brought me true happiness. I mean, that if I had practiced my free will and resisted, look what I would be missing out on, you know? And what I would like to notate is that, well, I knew scientists studied consciousness. I had no idea that they studied coincidence. So both of my books now have gotten the attention of scientists. Interestingly, so there's this outfit in the UK. It's a Scientific and Medical Network. And they invited me to be part of their group, these scientists who study paranormal events, as the only non-academic, non-scientist. And interestingly, they're really interested in the first book about the coincidences. But they were not, they showed no interest in the second book, which, well, it was all part of one book, but there were so many events that I couldn't cram them into one book. So I plucked all the ones that had to do with death. So that's my second book, Consciousness Beyond Death. And so like these scientists, they can write about near-death experiences because they've been researched for decades. But I'm not touching your, book with a 10-foot pole. And then lucky for me, just before publication of the second book, a new field of science cropped up, ADC, after death communication. So now they're all interested in the book.
Wow. Mm-hmm. What has that been like for you? How did they get in touch with you, or did you reach out to them?
I was thinking this the other day. No, actually, for some reason, I got an email, sort of announcing an event that piqued my interest. And I wrote back, and the executive director, invited me to, he does a book review every month, interviews a scientist and talks about the book. And so he had me talk about both books, and then it just grew from there, So I just feel so fortunate.
Yeah. What does it mean to you to have scientists specifically interested in what you're doing? Is it validating in a way that you didn't necessarily think about, when you were going through this and writing the books?
Well, you know what? I think that they need me as much as I need them. Okay? Because yes, you're absolutely right. They validate my experiences, but I validate the research.
Sure.
So yes, in fact, they invited me to help plan and participate in the Synchronicity Summit. And it was so well received that they published a book called The Playful Universe. And my essay is included in the book. And when you read some of these essays, they read almost like these sort of conversion, like I thought like a materialistic scientist, and now these experiences have changed my worldview. So it's life-changing for them. So basically they are catching up.
Yeah.
They're catching up. And so it's nice to see that you can be a scientist and believe that you can have a communication with a divine intelligence.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you been to the UK to visit them?
No,
okay.
It's all virtual.
Would you want to?
Ever since this COVID thing happened, it seems like my world expanded. And so I really don't have the need.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be nice, like if I'm there, but not to go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it would be nice to meet them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So what then what's the next step? What does the future look like? Are you still working with them? Is there more work that you're collaborating on together?
Well, now, just now, because of this new scientific field, ADC, they are starting to delve into after-death communication. And lucky for me, the book is already written. And so we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very exciting. Did you ever think that this is where you would be in your life, or
No.
Yeah.
No, but I just feel so fortunate that somehow, I listen to the signs, and I don't think I can feel more grateful. I don't think, and I do believe that gratitude is the highest form of prayer. But every time you say thank you and every time you say please, you are communicating with divine intelligence. And I would say, keep doing it and keep trusting. And I believe that if you go back to how did I meet my husband? How did I get this job? And think of if I hadn't done this, maybe it wouldn't have taken me to that, street corner
Sure.
or cafe or, whatever. So I think that people who may say, oh, well, why don't I have these experiences? Well, if you start paying attention, you may find that you've already had them.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you suggest for people to start stretching that muscle, to start kind of tuning into what's going on around them and paying attention so that these meaningful coincidences don't pass them by and they can start to take action? What would you suggest to somebody?
Well, I think you are communicated by your intuition. Okay. So in the examples that I gave you, it was like a kick in the stomach. It wasn't just, oh, how nice. It was a kick in the stomach that, so I don't know how long it took me to develop to that certainty.
Yeah.
But it's here. So it is when you feel this. I mean, if your intuition is telling you to go rob a bank, I feel like your brain should kick in.
Let's hope so.
But when it's on this level, it's like you just, question and then do it. Mm-hmm. Take action.
Yeah. I think from hearing you talk, part of kind of tuning in is being open to possibility, right? If we're so rigid in what we think our life is supposed to or going to look like, or even what we think we deserve, and limit ourselves in that way, like we limit what we cap ourselves into. Mm-hmm. Okay, like this would be the best thing that I could ever receive. And if I get that, like I'll be happy. And it really just like doesn't even touch the realm of what's possible. And, so I think maybe we do ourselves disservice when we, kind of try to draw too many parameters around what our life is going to look like.
Exactly. And so going back to, my 10 years in college, okay, so the right thing to do, right, according to my parents, is to graduate with this degree in art education. And what flipped that was I had another dream. It was like a very brief dream. And it was the doorbell rang. I answered the doorbell. It was the mailman. He hands me an envelope. I open the envelope and it's my license to teach. And I look at it and I go, I don't want to teach. And I tossed it into this little wastebasket. And I woke up and I went and changed my major to art history because there was no archaeology department. So it's paying attention to what speaks to you and not being afraid. See, I could have been afraid once I was in art history to go into architecture, but it was so strong that it didn't matter what other people said or that my father was cutting me off financially. I went and did it. Yeah. I got financial aid. I got jobs. I did it. So it's almost physical.
Yeah.
It's almost in the gut.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, you touched on this just now, but in your story before about needing the validation of other people can be such a limiting thing. And now I do believe we're all human to some degree. We do need that type of connection, but there are always going to be people that don't understand what you're doing. And I think that's probably because they've never been in the same situation or they've never tried to do something, the outside of the parameters that they've drawn for themselves for whatever reason. And so I think that it is important to realize that approval is so fleeting anyway, that if that's what you're chasing, you're always going to be chasing it, right?
Yes.
So I do have a question that I ask everybody at the end of each episode, which is, through the lens of your experience, what does compassion mean to you?
Compassion is getting out of your way to look at another human another way and to recognize what their need is. And to, if you can't find the words or something to be with them, just be with them.
Yeah, I agree. Meeting people where they're at. It is a hugely effective and incredible way to support other
and
people.
And that goes without judging. You know, we're humans, and I am the first human, right? I mean, I can say, "Oh, don't judge," and then I see somebody, you know, that is wearing something, and I go, oh, "That's so inappropriate." In 2 seconds, I forget, you know. But then because I've been there, I can quickly come back to non-judgment.
Yeah.
So yes, you go and meet the person where that's what Jesus did.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Without asking them to change to be with him, right?
Exactly. And then they'll come to understand.
Yeah. Change is naturally occurring
Yeah.
when you feel safe, loved, and known.
Yeah. And if you don't feel loved by other people, you love yourself, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes that's the hardest lesson to learn. Well, we are going to link to obviously your books and where people can find you, your website, all of that fantastic stuff so that people can go ahead and grab your books as well and hopefully learn something from them. So very exciting. And I can't wait to hear what's next for you and what this, the collaboration with the scientists, you know, goes
we'll
even
see.
further into.
I'm not worried about it. That's for sure.
No, but it's very exciting. So
thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for, again, hosting. It's very nice when I can just walk in with my equipment and we can set up at your kitchen table. So it's very nice. Thank you. Thank you for listening to The Human Experience. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also support the podcast financially by going to my website, thehxpod.com, linked in the show notes, and clicking on Donate. It takes a lot of time and resources to create this podcast, so every little bit helps. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours. So be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and love well.